Thank you all for coming. Thank you for inviting me to Wayne and Neil and Rachel, and thank you for coming tonight. I happened to notice the Prince George's in Southern Maryland Going Out guide from the Washington Post, and let me just tell you what you're missing. Tonight you could have seen invasive species in the Chesapeake, or the almighty oyster, food, fighting, and sensibility. These are lectures. Or superior donuts, which I think is some sort of comedy drama. So thank you for choosing to come here instead. So I'm going to read from my novel, The Ninth Wife, which came out in 2011. I just will say a few things, and before I do, I'll read a few short excerpts. My grandparents were married, for real, were married for 65 years. My parents were married for 50 years, and I didn't, for some reasons I still haven't worked out in therapy, I didn't get married until I was in my late 30s. So it's something I really wanted to explore and write about. So I felt that when I finally met someone and we were contemplating marriage, I realized that at my age I was working as much from my heart and my head, which might not have been the case when I was in my 20s, but having been a bit older, I was really going through these things, and I thought, well, you know, everybody has baggage, but particularly when you're 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you get more and more baggage. So what would be good baggage to write about for a novel? And then I thought, you know, a lot of my friends at that age were meeting men and women who had been married before. And then I thought, what if they had been married more than once? What if they had been married a lot? And then it turned into something that I really wanted to write about. So that's what this is about. It's about Bess. She's a single woman who's 35. She meets Rory, who's 46. He's been married 8 times before, but doesn't reveal this until he asks her to marry him. The chapters alternate throughout the novel between, just because I wanted to write from different perspectives, different points of view, between her perspective and his, but also in part 2 from a few other perspectives. Her grandparents factor into the story here because she, in part 2, goes on a journey to, in part, seek out some of the ex-wives, and the grandparents go along for the ride. So I'm going to read 3 short sections. I'm going to start with, and they're very different, so I want to give a flavor of the novel. The first one is, I'm going to jump to the grandparents, mostly about her grandfather, to give an idea of what they're like. And this takes place at their house, not far from here. Bess feels like a giant standing next to her grandparents. She figures they must be down to under 5 feet by now, and they can't weigh more than 100 pounds each. They were never big people, but lately they seem particularly small and getting smaller, like thawing snowmen. Their wrists thin as twigs, their clothes too big for their frames, their round faces now sallow and sagging so their crooked noses stick farther out. She can look down and see the brown sunspots on Irv's scalp through thin rows of gray hair and the bits of dandruff stuck to the outside folds of his big ears, wrinkled like dried apricots. Millie's silver hair is thinning too, but she has it styled and sprayed into place each week, preserving its poof by sleeping on a special moon-shaped pillow. At 86, Irv couldn't give 2 farts what he looked like, his white dress shirt hanging haphazardly over his belt, his fly undone. But the day Millie, who is 4 years younger, gives up on her appearance is the day she gives up on life, she likes to say. The women's fashion magazines still pile up at her bedside. Her closets are still full of seasonal ensembles. She dons her pantsuits for appointments in the city and her jogging suits for her morning walks around the neighborhood or, when it's too cold out, around the top floor of the mall before it opens. Today she has on a black sweater, pearls, and gray slacks with a perfect crease down the front and back of each leg. "I like your sweater," says Bess, making conversation. "Where'd you get it?" "You like it? I don't remember where I got it. You want to try it on?" "No, Graham, that's okay. It looks good on you." Bess has to be careful distributing compliments in their house, for they will offer her anything they own if she shows interest. "So tell us," says Irv, leading her into the living room. "How does it feel to be 16? It's her birthday, by the way, 35th birthday. "How does it feel to be 16? Bess chuckles. "I'll always be 16 to you. Is that it, Gramp?" "Ah, sweet Bessie, you'll always be my sweet little girl." Big charmer over there, Millie calls out from the kitchen. He's forgotten how old you are. Don't let him fool you. He's terrible. Only has one grandchild. You don't think he'd remember how old she is? Of course I remember how old my sweet granddaughter is. What are you talking about? Irv yells out, then leans in towards Bess with raised eyebrows. 35, she whispers. 35, he yells out triumphantly. Twice as sweet, a very grown-up, accomplished young lady. Ugh, groans Millie. Bessie, come see my latest acquisition, come. He takes a book from the shelf and motions for her to follow him. Mildred, he yells, flicking on the light at the top of the dank staircase. We're going downstairs. The spiral wooden stairway to the basement creaks with each step. The walls are cement and the air is considerably cooler. Irv pulls a string from a bulb in the middle of the room, and the harsh light shines on dozens of pairs of eyes surrounding them, staring blankly in their direction. An eerie, unsmiling audience of stiff, anorexic bodies, some pointing their accusatory fingers at Bess, some looking upward, as if in contemplation, some about to take a step, a few missing an arm, one in the corner, disturbingly headless, all upright and female and frightening in their thinness, their nakedness, their having been crowded into this cell like prisoners of war. Your mannequins freak me out every time, Gramp. I don't understand why you still keep them. They keep me company, these ladies, and they keep quiet. He smiles and winks at Bess. He must have about 30 or 40 of them, Bess figures. He started bringing them home from his dress shop when they got scuffed or broken and had to be replaced. There would be 5 or 6 mannequins at a time on display in the shop's front windows, each with its own distinct wig and dress made of, and maybe a shawl or handbag. He liked seeing them each morning. Hello, girls, he'd say, keeping an eye on the store, are you? He grew attached to them and felt in some odd way it was his duty to bring them home after they'd served their purpose. But after a while, he started to buy them quicker than he needed them, looking for unique ones with distinct markings or movable parts. Once he retired, he slowed his purchases down considerably, mostly because he was running out of room and Millie was on his case about it to no end. Bess had the feeling he spent a lot of time down here among his harem. Look, he says, pulling one out from behind a box in the corner. I just got her from a store in Northeast. She is dark brown with long, thin fingers and, as her grandfather proceeds to point out, movable at the wrists, elbows, shoulders, neck, waist, and knees. She has full lips and black painted-on eyebrows, but her most noticeable feature is her afro, as she is one of the few mannequins in the room with hair. How old is she? Asked Bess. Probably a 70s model. She's scuffed at the joints, but other than that, she's in perfect shape. Look, someone drew a peace sign around her belly button. But she's supposed to wear clothes. What's she doing with a belly button? Well, that's the beauty of it, he says. They probably needed the belly button to show off low miniskirts or high halter tops. Remember halter tops? I'm going to name her Peace. Bess stares at her eyes, which are gazing confidently up toward a corner of the ceiling. Her stillness is spooky, as if when the lights go out and the humans leave, she might come alive and incite her fellow mannequins to revolt. Irv leaves the room for a moment and returns with a cassette player. He plugs it in and presses play, and the room suddenly sounds like a smoky bar. T-Bone Walker, says Irv, best blues player there ever was. Peace, would you like to dance? He positions her arms, one around his waist, the other around his neck, picks her up, and with closed eyes, dances her around to the old scratchy recording of Walker's Hypin' Woman Blues. Bess watches him. The reason for her grandfather's fondness for female mannequins is probably not all that difficult to figure out. She thinks students in a Psych 101 class might comment on his loneliness, his need for ownership and control, to savor the past and forget about aging, to create a safe haven among friends, not to mention any sexual overtones Bess doesn't want to contemplate. But what's puzzling is his interest in this particular mannequin, this African-American 70s beauty, which makes Bess think she really doesn't know her grandfather well, or at least the man he was in his younger days. Maybe he was a swinger. Maybe he dated women like Peace before he married Millie. Maybe he didn't do a whole lot of what he really wanted to do in the 86 years he's been on this earth, which is why he's dancing around his basement with a mannequin in his arms, humming, swaying, smiling, and imagining. Bess taps him on the shoulder, feeling a sudden urge to be part of this imaginary world that makes him smile so broadly. May I cut in? She means, of course, could she dance with him, but he nods and hands her the mannequin, stepping back to clap to the rhythm. Oh, says Bess, face to face with the woman's perfect plastic cheeks. Okay, then. She grabs onto the figure's tiny waist and slowly twirls her around like a schoolboy at his first social. Look, Gramp, she says, I'm giving peace a chance. Either he doesn't hear her or he doesn't get it, for his gaze is elsewhere, and Bess can tell he is alone, somewhere out there. So that's the grandparents. As I said, they factor in quite a bit in part 2 in the book, and she finds out a lot about herself and her grandparents that she didn't know. I'm going to jump back now to, I'm going to read 2 sections. One is the party where she meets Rory for the first time. She throws she's the hostess, she's throwing a party, it's a singles party. It's very similar to a singles party I actually threw in my own apartment. It was a big success. I had 75 people. I didn't know most of them, and nobody stole anything. That was a success. And I actually dated someone, but it only lasted 3 months. Anyway, they're meeting at a singles party, and in he comes. What I should tell you also is that 2 other people show up, Sonny and Gaia. Sonny is an ex-boyfriend. He's sort of an Asian American Southerner, very charming, and his very pregnant girlfriend, Gaia. Always fun to bump into your ex-boyfriend with his pregnant girlfriend. Then she had bumped into him that morning. And it's her birthday. She's having a party. And she did tell him a party, but she didn't tell him it was a singles party. Excuse me, she hears behind her. Are you going in? It's a maple syrup voice, a slow, pouring purr that gives her a quick shiver. Me? She says, turning up toward this handsome man's puckish smile. He looks straight out of the dust bowl, lean but strong, a narrow face, thin lips, weathered skin that hints of bold adventures. He runs his hand through his thick, wavy salt and pepper hair, and it falls back defiantly to his brow. His sharp nose slopes off to the right. His 2 front teeth are slightly askew, as if they know they take center stage and are too mischievous to line up at attention. What strikes her most, though, are his beautiful green eyes under tufted, peppery eyebrows, as animated and lucid as carbonated limeade. Someone she doesn't know opens her door and beckons, "Come on in, it's a party." Together they step into her bare, narrow hallway. "Do you know the hostess?" he asks. He is rolling up the sleeves of his white button-down shirt, and Bess finds herself mesmerized by his hand movements as she would a magician's. She has an urge to touch his knuckles. They are mountain ranges to her knuckle hills. Do I know the hostess? Truthfully, she says, I really don't think I do. They are far from a window with its gift of an evening breeze, and Bess's upper lip is now glistening, which, added to her runny, itchy nose from her allergies, must be very attractive. Well, she's clever. She is, says Bess, pulling out a crumpled, dirty tissue from her pants pocket. The invitation to the party, he says. It was clever. He moves like a soccer player, slightly bow-legged, comfortable at a slant. And is that an accent she detects? A faint lilt here, a skipped beat there, syllables stressed or glossed over. But then I have to say, he continues, it was definitely hiding something. Oh, God, shoot me now. What do you mean, she says. I mean, there was an undercurrent of real angst, sadness, fear, a visceral desire for truths coupled with an overpowering exhaustion at having eluded those truths for years. He's psychoanalyzing with an accent. This can't be good. Really, she says, all that. Absolutely. It made me want to rifle through her drawers, check out her medicine cabinet, look for her journals. That's what I always do first at parties. She's too shocked to respond. He laughs. I'm kidding. He holds out his hand. You're Bess Gray? My name's Rory McMillan. You're the fiddler? That's me. How did you know who I was? I was here earlier. Gabrielle pointed you out. I was just suddenly really sick from something I ate that I had to run outside for some fresh air. Oh, no, and then she sees his face. You're kidding again. Sorry, I actually saw you leave your own party, so I walked out to find you. I see. Now you don't know what to believe. Sorry about that. I did like your invite. It made me want to meet you. That's the truth. A high-pitched cackle erupts nearby. Bess uses the interruption to put the focus back on him. You're Irish. Now wait, is that my line that gave it away or my accent? Careful now. Your accent. And you're good. I haven't lived in Ireland for almost 30 years. I hear a lot of accents in my line of work, she says. Okay, I'm going to skip a few pages so that I get to what happens at the party. They flirt, they meet, they drink, they do other things. everything's going swimmingly, and then a cool breeze rustles the leaves outside the front window. Bess, can you come here, please? Her assistant calls out from the entranceway. Bess makes her way through the L-shaped hallway, and as she is saying, "What is it?" she stops abruptly. There in the doorway are Sonny and Gaia. "Sonny, what are you doing here?" Sonny is fidgety. He's bopping and tapping his chest with his pinkies and thumbs to the beat of something he's humming. He slow punches the air off her shoulder. "Gaia here felt so bad that you were going to be alone on your birthday. She insisted on keeping you company." He smiles and stretches to see past Bess. "But you always knew how to partay, girl. Didn't I tell you, Geisha baby?" "Did you just call her Geisha?" says Bess's assistant with her hand on her hip. "It's Gaia," says Gaia pleasantly, as if she were saying, there, to a crying child. She's wearing a tie-dyed sundress that accents the leafy tattoo above her left breast. Her eyelids sparkle, her long orange wavy hair is tangled in the sunglasses atop her head. Her wrists are covered with dozens of green rubber bands. She holds out a potted plant wrapped in red ribbon. "Happy birthday, Bess." "Thank you." Bess rotates the pot as if by turning it she can figure out if it's anything more than what it looks like, a tiny tree. "It's a fir tree," says Gaia. "Fir trees have powerful restorative qualities, but this one's just a baby." She reaches out and tickles the pines with her fingers. "It needs your help to grow now, and when you're ready, you can choose its home outside and plant it in the ground." Didn't she mean when it's ready, like when it grows out of its pot or something? Should she mention that her green plants always end up crackly brown and poking out of garbage bags? Now that the plant is no longer blocking Gaia's belly, her pregnancy is in full view. "This is very nice of you," says Bess, "and I'm sorry for the miscommunication about my birthday. I just didn't want to make it a big deal." "It's okay," says Gaia. Her slow breathing makes her breasts and shoulders rise and fall as gently as the undulating waves of an ocean's cove. Her skin is smooth and white as fine sand. "Well, as long as we're here," says Sonny, slipping past Bess. "Wait," says Bess, trying to grab his arm. "You can't." But it's too late as the last flap of his bowling shirt disappears into the apartment. Her assistant shakes her head, takes Bess's tree for her, and follows him into the kitchen. Bess is now alone with Gaia, who is rubbing her belly and leaning against the doorframe. Bess contemplates telling Gaia it's a singles party, but she's not sure she has the nerve. A pregnant woman as a singles party, that's a good one. The pregnant girlfriend of her ex-boyfriend at her singles party, even better. "You know, it's funny," begins Bess. "This is kind of a..." "Ow!" yells Gaia, cringing and reaching out for Bess's shoulder. What is it? Are you okay?" "Wow," says Gaia, sounding like she's underwater. That was heavy. Bess doesn't want to know what heavy means. "Listen, forget it. Here," she says to Gaia, cupping her elbow. "Why don't you come in and lie down?" "Thank you," says Gaia. She settles in and begins to survey her surrounding, which makes Bess nervous. "I'll get you a glass of water," says Bess. In the living room, the music is still playing. People are still drinking and talking. Sonny is in a corner talking to two women. And Bess has half a mind to pull him away by the ear and thrust him into her bedroom to be with Gaia. But then there are memories of Sonny in that bedroom and better not add to the weirdness of the circumstances. So she takes her filtered water from the fridge, and as she pours a glass, she looks around for Rory. "Where is he?" "Gabrielle," she calls out. "Where's Rory?" Gabrielle sees Bess's disappointment and puts on a serious face. "I'm sorry, sweetie, I think he left." Bess feels irritated. He didn't even say goodbye. As she carries the glass of water to her bedroom, she thinks, who cares? It doesn't matter. He's too old anyway, too flirty, too cocky, too unibrowed. Bess's buzz is wearing off. She wants the night to end, to get everyone out of her apartment. For God's sake, this has gone on too long. Good night, people. Good night. Get out. You get my hopes up, and you crush them like ants underfoot. This night couldn't have ended any worse. Oh, God. Bess? A guy with a scared look on his face beckons her from the bedroom doorway. She rushes into the room to see Gaia sitting up on the side of her bed, wringing out the bottom edge of her sundress. Water has spread out from Gaia to darken Bess's baby alpaca blanket and her Egyptian cotton weave sheets and is now dripping down Gaia's pale legs toward Bess's antique Turkish rug. Oh, God, the guy repeats, pacing back and forth from the bed to the door. Is there a doctor here? He yells into the living room. People are now coming into the bedroom to see what's going on. Bess chides herself for thinking of her personal belongings and tries to think straight. The glass of water she poured for Gaia feels ridiculous in her hand, as if she could just as well dump it on her bed as watch someone drink it. I'll get a towel, she announces, and she hides for a moment in the bathroom. So Gaya's water broke. That's no big deal, right? Doesn't mean she's going to have the baby right then and there, but then there have been stories. She read about that woman on the subway in Boston whose water broke and out popped a baby a minute later. That seems like a Monty Python skit, but it can happen. Other women go through 42 hours of labor and some drop in minutes, and what if Gaya had to give birth right there in her own bed? She can just see it, the blood, the head, the fingers, the tiny feet, the writhing, crying kidney bean of life right there in her own bed on the very spot where some mornings she stays under the covers and presses the snooze alarm 7 times because she is dreaming of a day when she doesn't have dreams of the things she wants, because the things she wants she has, tiny fingers and feet to call her own. In her bedroom, she sees towels everywhere, strangers leaning on her dresser, and a woman she just met a few hours ago in her bed with her legs spread open. "What are we going to do?" says a guy in a high puppet voice, his hand maneuvering one of Bess's sock monkey slippers that she must have forgotten to hide. Bess looks around for Sonny. He's not in the bedroom, he's not in the living room, or the kitchen, or the hallway, or outside the building. She can't believe he's gone. "You've got to be shitting me," she cries out to the street. "Is there some sort of black hole in my place?" She doesn't know what to do or what to tell Gaya. The girlfriend of her ex-boyfriend, a label she keeps repeating in her head, is about to give birth, and the only people around to help her are a bunch of drunken singles. She needs to call an ambulance. Everyone in her bedroom, it seems, is offering opinions from relax to do something. The ones in the relax camp are amused, have found reasons to pour more drinks. Gaya sits quietly, watching, until she sees Bess and motions for her to approach. Bess kneels at her side. "It's okay, Bess," Gaya almost whispers so that only Bess can hear. Her hand is on Bess's shoulder. "He'll be back." Bess nearly jumps back as if avoiding a punch. How did she know? Did someone see her walk in with Sonny and tell her? And why is it all right? Why is it all right? Sonny should be here. But Gaya is calm, almost smiling reassuringly. It makes Bess wonder if she's talking about Rory, too. "Yes," says Gaya, as if in answer to an unsaid question. "We'll be just fine." "We? Why we?" We, as if they were in this together, as if they've known each other all their lives and can feel each other's pain. Bess backs out of the room, picks up the phone in her living room and dials 911. "Metropolitan Police Department, your name, please?" "Bess Gray," she says. "We," that word channeling through her as if coming from some ancient place, flying through the ages from long ago war widows and cocooned queens and poor orphaned girls to all the women now who know, too, the pain of loneliness. "We," she repeats, "we need help." So now I'm just, the final section, it's short, and just to give you a taste of Rory's voice. It's his point of view, it's first person. And as I said, the chapters alternate between Rory and Bess's courtship and Rory telling the story of each of his wives and how they came to be. So this is one of the wives, I think wife number 3. Wife number 1 was Maggie, who he met in Ireland and came over to the States with. Wife number 2 was a woman in Boston. This is a woman who, her name is Lorraine, and he is in Toledo, and it's 1984. So this is his voice now. "I was feeling kind of lost one day and decided to go for confession and unload some of the things I've been thinking about in my marriages, to get some grounding. I haven't exactly made religion a part of my life, but I tend to seek it out when I'm down. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 5 years since my last confession," I said, and I started to tell my tale, and the priest, you know what he said? "Do the right thing. Always do the right thing." I tell you, I don't think he heard a word I was saying, and probably he said that stock phrase to every sorry soul who came to see him, but for whatever reason, it resonated. I thought it was deep, and I pondered its meaning and tried to abide by it however I could. And it was under those circumstances that I met Lorraine, because she was watching me from the back of the church when I went to sit in the pews for a while. And then I saw her again out in the parking lot, and when I went to get into my car, she waved hello, and I waved back. Next thing I know, I go to pull out, and there she is in the Volkswagen, and bam, I hit right into her. Not hard, just a tap, but I heard a definite crunching of metal, and so I got out, ran over to the car to see if she was okay. "I'm fine," she says, and then she fires questions at me, ignoring the fact that we just had an accident. "What's my name? Where am I from? Do I like dogs?" Seriously, she asked me that right from the start, about dogs, and I tell you, I was a little taken aback. I suppose I like dogs, I said, and then I mentioned a car repair shop around the corner. I offered to follow her there and then give her a lift home, which I did because I'm thinking it's the right thing to do. And when we got to her apartment, a dreary gray building between a construction site and a used car dealership, I walked her to her door, and when she invited me up to her place, I went because I thought it was the right thing to do after I just hit her car. Well, I'll tell you, 7 months later, I'm standing at the courthouse with Lorraine, saying our vows, saying those words the priest said to me over and over again like a mantra, do the right thing, do the right thing, do the right thing. But everything I ever did with Lorraine couldn't have been more wrong. Why did I marry her? Well, if you want to get Freudian about it, I'd say she reminded me of my mother. She was of Irish stock, and she was quiet and tidy. You'd take your last sip of coffee, and before you could set your mug back down on the table, she'd whisk it off to the sink. Now wait, let me explain, because I don't want you getting the wrong idea about my mother, God forbid. It wasn't sexual at first with Lorraine. I don't mean to say she was altogether unattractive, just plain. She had meaty thighs, reddish shoulder-length hair she wore back in a headband, and she favored plum-colored outfits with matching socks and sensible shoes. But she also had very large breasts and full lips and the softest pale skin I ever felt, though she was addicted to lip gloss and all types of hand lotion, tubes of which turned up everywhere so that I was always sitting or stepping on them, squirting the lotion onto the furniture or the carpet where her dogs would lick it up and end up vomiting into the wee hours of the night to make matters worse. Jesus, those bloody dogs. Lorraine had 4 mutts that she had rescued from the local shelter, all shapes and sizes, all ludicrously named after one of the 7 dwarfs. I say ludicrous because their dispositions had nothing to do with their names. Sleepy never stopped barking. Sneezy was aloof, almost catatonic. Happy wore a muzzle to stop him from biting people, and I couldn't get Bashful to stop humping my leg. It got damn well crowded in that apartment of hers, and I didn't even mention all the stuffed animals she had piled up on her couch, her bed, her shelves, her counters. You couldn't pee without some wide-eyed pastel-colored monkey or bear or dinosaur staring you down or threatening to fall into the toilet. Crazy? Now, you know I'm a storyteller, and you probably think I'm making this up, but I swear it's true. She was clean, but my God, she liked clutter. Anyway, like I said, no sex. It wasn't like that at the beginning for me anyway, not with a big cross over her bed and all those animals, real and stuffed, and her seeming young and innocent. She was Snow White. When I met her, she was 25, a year older than me and living on her own, working as a receptionist in a dentist's office. But she seemed in many ways just like a little girl, a kid really, and yet she had a maternal nature, and she was kind, and I was in need of a friend, and that's how we started spending time together. We'd walk her dogs in the park and go to movies and do volunteer work at the local soup kitchen through the church. She told me at the outset that she was a virgin, and she intended to keep her virtue until she got married, and I took that as a warning not to make a move, which was fine because I didn't have designs on her and certainly had no intention of getting married again. But then, as it happened, my brother Eamon died. I got the call from my father. He said Eamon was sick and they didn't think he was going to make it and maybe I should come home, that they would help me pay for it if they could. The news hit me hard. I took off for Ireland immediately. Eamon looked so thin, so gaunt there in the hospital. Hearing him say he loved me before he let go was more than I could bear. He passed on 3 days after I arrived. I stayed for the funeral and a week beyond, helping out around the house and stopping in on my old haunts. It was nice to be home, to sit and have soup with my parents, catch up with my sisters, get drunk with my friends. We all dealt with our grief in our own way. But after a week there, I was ready to leave. I don't know how to explain it. It's a powerful thing to go back after a few years to a place where you grew up, but you get to realizing it's not going back exactly as time's moved forward and you feel kind of stuck. Plus, I missed America. And I mean just that. I didn't miss anything in particular, not my job or Toledo or even Lorraine so much as I missed the whole package. America was an indescribable feeling, I guess you could say. I missed the feeling. Besides, they knew about Maggie, first wife, and me, and that was hard to live with. So in a moment of weakness, when my mother looked like she was on the verge of tears, worrying about me so far away, I told her about Lorraine, about how she was a nice Irish-American girl who reminded me of her and not to worry. I didn't say we were dating exactly, but I didn't say we weren't. "You going to marry this girl then, Rory?" she asked. My mother wouldn't stop worrying until she knew I was married and cared for, that much I knew, and the poor woman had just lost her eldest son, so I answered yes without thinking, and I went back to America. Lorraine picked me up from the airport, and there were those lips and those breasts and her soft skin embrace. You get what I'm saying, right? She grabbed hold, hugging me the way she did with such sympathy, and I cried, and she cried with me. We went home and made love. Are you sure? I said. I've never been more sure, she said back. 2 months later, we were married. See, I convinced myself Lorraine was the right kind of girl for me. I felt, well, comforted is maybe the word. Each morning she handed me my lunch in a brown bag decorated with a Disney sticker and a quote of inspiration. She baked apricot muffins and gave me answers I couldn't get on my crossword puzzles. She remembered my birthday and handmade me a party hat. Our lives were ordinary lives folding one day into the next, and one of those ordinary days I just cracked. I didn't do anything but have an epiphany standing there in the kitchen. But what happened after I ran out of the apartment is where the story is, the beginning of the end, you could say. My epiphany was this. I was wasting my life. I was in a kind of fairy tale coma, and I needed to get out. I wasn't in love with Lorraine, and my God, I had had it with her dogs. The problem was, Lorraine wasn't home when I got this rush of a feeling that made me grab my coat and make a fast escape. Okay, so now you're thinking, I left the door open by accident and let all those dogs loose. No, I knew better than that. Lorraine had trained me well, and locking the door behind me was habit by then. No, see, Lorraine was up the whole night before baking sugar cookies for the homeless shelter's anniversary celebration. She baked something like 12 dozen cookies. They were stacked on trays on the counter, and I was to wrap them up and bring them over to the shelter while she was doing errands, but I didn't. I left them unwrapped in the kitchen while I was gone for hours. You getting what I'm saying, right? The dogs. I forgot to feed the dogs, and them being hungry and curious and typical canine food grabbers, they got a hold of those cookies like there was no tomorrow, ate every last one of them. Well, those dogs got on such a sugar high, they went wild. They tore through the apartment like a tornado, chewing through every last stuffed animal so that the living room looked like a battleground in winter, little limbs and heads strewn about in a blanket of cotton. They knocked over lamps and broke her figurines, vomited up the cookies and the cotton, and finally passed out on their backs in such deep slumber that when Lorraine came back to see the scene, can you imagine, she thought they were all dead. I found out about it all the next day when I returned, because I had to come back and end it properly. That was the least I could do. The dogs turned out okay, but Lorraine, she wouldn't speak to me. The neighbors who were there to help clean up formed a wall between her and me, saying she didn't want to see me and I should just go. In the days and weeks that followed, I tried to call, but she wouldn't answer. So I had no choice. I broke it off in a letter. I wrote her several letters, as a matter of fact, but I stopped when one got returned and I found out she moved without a forwarding address. Getting a divorce after that, I can tell you, was no small task. I hope she's happy. And the truth is, the wrong I did her came back to me tenfold. I'm saying I got what I deserved with my next 2 wives, who sent me spiraling downward and straight into rehab. My late 20s, now they were some dark years. Thank you. Some very, very dark place in my brain. It's one of the things I really did make up. My grandfather did own a dress shop, so I had that in mind, that he had mannequins. But the 30 or 40 mannequins in a basement, the image of that I just loved, and what it represented. I mean, this is a story about a man with too many women in his past. So it worked nicely to have the grandfather represented by having all these mannequins in his basement to play off of, and what that symbolized. But in some ways, these women I'm fascinated by mannequins. I always have been. And I did a little research on mannequins. They've actually been, I'm so happy to hear that they've been filling out. They were so skinny decades ago, and now they're fuller. But the mannequins, to think that they're just because they have eyes and some have hair and limbs and all this, doesn't mean that they're women. You know, what they represent, they are as lifeless as doorposts sometimes, you know. But if you walk into particularly a basement where you have to turn on a light and see 30 or 40 of them all at once, and then see someone like Irv, like her grandfather, dancing with one of them amidst this, it's just spooky enough. And there's a theme running through this book of what can you truly know? Like this is a woman, and it's true for me. I was saying earlier today that my grandparents died before I really knew much about them or about their long marriage. And I was exploring that too. Like, you have to, at some point, you can investigate your past, but at some point you have to let it go, because there's nothing you can't know everything. You can't truly know everything, and so you got to let some of it go. But it worked nicely for Bess to see her grandfather like that and really wonder what's going on. And if you know it later in the book, there's a discovery you make about him and his past, and it lent itself to that too. So it was more of liked the image and the metaphor. So. Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it?
It's quite a lot.
I know. I started with 12.
Really?
But it was too much.
Yeah.
And then, my husband said when he was reading, he was like, "That's ridiculous. Who would marry someone who's been married 8 times before? Why don't you just do 4?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Would you marry somebody who's been married 4 times before?" I was like, "Well, at least it's more believable." And I thought, what's the fun in that? This is a novel. I have to make him likable and believable enough, but I have to push it. This is a novel, so I really have to push it. And 8, and then I started investigating serial serial spouses, I should say. They're peppered all throughout this book. So that today too, like, there's people make appearance here. Elizabeth Taylor, Larry King, Norman Mailer, all these people in real life have had many spouses, and I was sort of curious about that. So it can work. And that was part of the fun, the challenge of writing this, to write those stories. And as far as why I went with the 9th wife is because 9 seemed symbolic, the 9th ring of hell, the 9th. There's just a lot of symbolism to 9, and it sounded nice, the 9th wife, rather than the 11th wife, I guess. Thank you for coming.